Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Here's tight end starts at every matchup this week. Dallas Cowboys at the Lions. Thursday Night Football. Jake Ferguson. It's been a solid season for him. I know his numbers have definitely dropped off over the last month of the season since CeeDee Lamb returned to the starting lineup. And when you play behind, obviously, two great wide receivers in CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, targets and looks are going to go down weekly. But like I said, Ferguson, he's still a tight end that could go out there and make plays, especially a good target in the red zone. And him and Dak Prescott have had good rapport throughout Ferguson's career. So this week in a potential high-scoring game on a fast track in Detroit, I still would start him. Brock Wright, if he plays, he was out in last week's game with a neck injury. We'll see if he's coming back, but Wright didn't start off the week practicing. So if he's out, once again, Ross Dwelly's going to be the starting tight end, and he's nothing more than a blocker. And at times, a guy who's occasionally going to catch the football. So he's a sit this week. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, Darnell Washington all sits for me in this game. Pretty much Pat Freiermuth all season long, he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end, and this offense didn't look good at all in that ball game versus the Buffalo Bills. So with Aaron Rodgers not 100%, and even if it's Mason Rudolph in this game and he's 100%, let's say if Rodgers don't give it a go for whatever reason with the hand or if they're taking that monster hit, I can't trust Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith. He's been a non-factor all season long for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, so he wouldn't be a guy you play in a big Week 14 game. And Darnell Washington definitely starting to come around, but like I said, there's three tight ends, Pittsburgh Steelers team, and I don't trust any of them. Mark Andrews a start. Last week, an okay game it was for Mark Andrews. I know he's a touchdown-dependent tight end, but with four teams on bye and some injuries at the position, I still think Mark Andrews, he could be in that top 12-15 range this week in a matchup versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. A.J. Barner said, I know Barner's had a good season, and he's the number two option in this offense more than weeks than not in the passing game for the Seattle Seahawks team, where obviously it's JSN, and then it's pretty much been Barner. Cooper Kupp's not having a good first season with Seattle. His better days are behind him. And also Torrey Horton, we've only seen a couple good games from him, and Shaheed has been a non-factor since they made a deal for him at the deadline. But this week, even in a decent matchup at the Falcons, to me, Barner's a sit. Like I said, he is the number two option in this offense, but he's inconsistent, and he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end all season. Kyle Pitts a sit. Last week, finally, it was a good game for Kyle Pitts. I'll give him some credit there, but this week, possibly with Drake London returning, and a way tougher matchup this week than it was last week, where it was a good matchup at the Jets, and this week versus arguably the best defense in the league over the last month of the season in Seattle. Kyle Pitts to me is a sit. I know he's an athletic tight end. He could go out there and make plays, but more times than not, he disappoints, it seems like, in big situations as Kyle Pitts. Tennessee Titans at the Cleveland Browns. Chigga been a good year once again for Chigga. And this Titan team as a whole, there's no one on that roster I would trust, especially in a Week 14 game, to put in my starting lineup. So with Okwongo not doing much this season and a very tough matchup versus a good defense of the Browns, he's a sit. Harold Fan in the start. David Njoku the last month of the season pretty much has been a non-factor for this Cleveland Brown team. And Harold Fan and Shedeur Sanders, they got good rapport. Going back to training camp, playing with the backups, practicing a lot and stuff like that. And also Harold Fannin, since week one, he's been a guy getting targets and making plays. Obviously, he knows his playbook well. And with the rapport with Sanders in a good matchup versus the Titans, he's a start for me. Miami Dolphins at the New York Jets, Darren Waller a start. I know Waller, he's been banged up a majority of the season. Going back early in the season, though, he had a big game versus shit defense. In his Dolphin debut, he had 2 touchdowns. Obviously, with Tyreek Hill out, who's been out for a long time and out for the season, he's the number two option to me in the passing game. Waller returned to the lineup last week in the matchup versus the Saints. It was nothing game really, though. 2 catches, 47 yards, but I think this week at the Jets, where their linebacking crew isn't any good, Waller could go out there and take advantage of mismatches. Mason Taylor is sit. Mason Taylor, he's had a couple good games this season, but he's been too inconsistent at the tight end position for me to put him in the starting lineup, even in a good matchup versus the Miami Dolphins, where guys like John Mechie and Adonai Mitchell are ahead of him still in the pecking order in the receiving game, even with Garrett Wilson out. So Taylor this week, a sit. New Orleans Saints to the Buccaneers. Juwan Johnson a start. Number two option in this passing game is Johnson behind Chris Olave. And him and Tyler Shuck, they have a good rapport. And I always say to my videos, a young quarterback's security blanket and best friend in the offense in key situations is the tight end position. So this week, in a matchup at Tampa Bay where their defense really hasn't been good, he's a start. Cade Otton, a fringe option of me this week. Cade Otton, it's been an up and down season. Early in the season, he didn't do anything. Then the midweeks, of the season, he had good ball games, and now the last couple weeks here, Cade Otton's pretty much been non-existent. The only reason I have him is a fringe option. That maybe he has a surprise game this week where we know the Saint defense really can't stop anyone, and he's still a big target in the red zone, even though this Tampa Bay Buc offense is finally starting to get a little bit healthy. Indianapolis Colts at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Big division matchup between these two teams. And Tyler Warren, it's been a great rookie season for him. I know he was slumping a little bit, but last week he did find the end zone. And he's still arguably the number 1A or the number 2 option in this offense. It's either him or Michael Pittman, to me, the top options in this passing game for this Indianapolis Colts team. So this week in a pretty good matchup at the Jaguars, where this could be a high-scoring game. He's a start. Brenton Strange a start the last 2 weeks back from injury. 2 games in a row with double-digit fantasy points it was for Strange. So Strange last week, a good game, 4 catches, 35 yards, found the end zone. He's been the most consistent target all season long in the games he's played for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. He's been better than Brian Thomas. Jacoby Myers, I know he's been good, but Strange obviously knows his system a little bit more. And this week versus the Indianapolis Colts, he's a start. Commanders at the Vikings, Zach Ertz a start. Last week, a big ball game it was for Zach Ertz, over 100 yards on 10 catches. I know he's not the fastest guy. I know obviously he definitely lost his step as Zach Ertz. IQ and route running, still one of the best at the tight end position. So this week in an indoor game where it's going to be better footing for all these players. After last week, it was bad conditions out there in Washington. I think Ertz could go out there and have a good game. And I know last week he dropped a crucial touchdown, but it didn't matter. They scored that drive anyway, was the Commanders. TJ Hawkinson a sit. It's been a lost season, unfortunately, here for TJ Hawkinson. And it's just been the quarterback play all season long. If it's been Wentz, McCarthy, Brosmer last week, nothing's going for this offense. So this week, even if it's back to McCarthy, he's an easy sit. Cincinnati Bengals at the Buffalo Bills, Mike Gesicki, Tanner Hudson are sits for me. This tight end position in this offense really isn't a big thing. I know Tanner Hudson found the end zone last week. I know Gesicki, he made a couple plays on and off this season. But it's always about Jamar Chase making plays, Chase Brown. And if T. Higgins returns to the lineup, the tight end position in this ball game is going to pretty much be limited on targets and obviously receptions. Now to the Bills, Dalton Kincaid, he's been out for a few weeks now with the hamstring injury. And the latest word he was progressing was Dalton Kincaid, but this Bill team taking caution with this hamstring that he could be healthy and 100% to go in the playoffs. So if he does return this week, it's a great matchup versus Cincinnati Bengals, a defense that can't stop anyone. And also the other thing is there's not many good options in this offense. It's pretty much Khalil Shakir, a collection of veteran wide receivers in Brandon Cooks, Joshua Palmer, and Gabe Davis, and also the second-year wide receiver in Keon Coleman, who obviously has been a bust so far. So if Kincaid could come back in this game, he's a start. And Dawson Knox, he pretty much hasn't done much since Kincaid's been out of the lineup, where I thought Knox could have been a decent sleeper for a few weeks for fantasy owners, but obviously that hasn't been the case. So he's a sit this week. Denver Broncos at the Vegas Raiders, Evan Ingram, I would start him in this game. So Denver came off the bye, and in Week 13, Evan Ingram easily had his best game as a Denver Bronco, including a big 41-yard catch to get him right within the 10-yard line, and R.J. Harvey ran it in for a touchdown in that ball game to give him the lead in overtime. So Evan Ingram, we know he's an athletic tight end. We've seen him have over 100-catch season a few years ago with the Jaguars, but now he just has to stay healthy, and he's more into this playbook now after the bye is Ingram. So this week in a good matchup at the Raiders, and coming off a great game, he's a start. Brock Bowers, stud tight end. He was the number 1 tight end off the board in most fantasy leagues. I know he missed 4 weeks with an injury early in the season, but he's been back over the last couple weeks and more weeks than not putting up numbers. Last week found the end zone twice, including a crazy one-hand scoop grab on the side of the end zone where his other arm was taken out from the defender, and he still with one hand scooped it up and caught it. So this week in a matchup, even versus a good defense of the Broncos, we just saw Zach Ertz go out there for 10 for 106 versus defense. Bowers a start. Chicago Bears at the Packers, Colston Loveland a fringe option. Loveland, to me, he's been a guy that's been up and down this season in his rookie year. And also as well, they did take him over Tyler Warren in the NFL draft. But Loveland, we could see the athleticism, we see the playmaking ability, but for the most part, this passing game hasn't been great the last month of the season, where it's been a run-first effort with DeAndre Swift and Monungai. Cole Kmet sit last week. I know he had 3 catches, 36 yards. Found the end zone was Cole Kmet, but he's not a tight end that's been consistent for many seasons now. And this week in a tough matchup at Green Bay, and like I said, with these other playmakers in Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Loveland, more weeks not ahead of him in the pecking order. He's an easy sit. Luke Musgrave is sit. I thought Musgrave could actually fill in and be all right filling in for Tucker Kraft. Obviously, I didn't expect him to come in and put up big numbers like Tucker Kraft did, where obviously he's out for the year with the torn ACL. But Luke Musgrave, he's been non-existent in this offense, and he was a decently rounded draft pick a few seasons ago. And right now, he's been a bust. Los Angeles Rams at the Arizona Cardinals, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, their sits. These guys pretty much are touchdown-dependent tight ends, and they're not seeing a lot of targets or a lot of plays their way, and rightfully so. When you got a Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams in the receiving room, and a good running back, and Kyron Williams and a solid backup back in Blake Corum, these guys aren't going to see the football. So even in a good matchup this week at Arizona, there sits Trey McBride. He's been a monster tight end all season long. Big season. It's been easily the number one tight end in points overall this season at the positions. And ever since Jacoby Brissett stepped into the lineup, Trey McBride, his numbers, he's taken to the next level. So this week, even in a tough matchup, in a game where most likely they'll be chasing points early and often, he's a must start. Houston Texans at the Chiefs, Dalton Schultz to start. To me, he's the number 2 option in the passing game behind Nico Collins is Dalton Schultz. He can make the plays. He good yard after catch and good hand type of tight end, where CJ Stroud last week got him involved more into the mix. He had a solid ball game. So this week in a matchup at the Kansas City Chiefs, where they're most likely going to be trailing in this one and chasing points, I think Schultz once again is a decent start. Travis Kelce a start. Last week found the end zone. And Travis Kelce, believe it or not, he's top 5 in total points at the tight end position this season. So Kelce's still going out there in the latter part of his career and making plays for this Kansas City Chief team and fantasy owners. And Kelce, to me, he's the number 2 option in this passing game, easily behind Rashee Rice. Philadelphia Eagles at the Chargers Monday night. Dallas Goedert to start. I know the last couple weeks, Dallas Goedert, his numbers have gone down. Definitely for this Philadelphia Eagle team, where A.J. Brown's getting more involved and Devonta Smith more involved back in this offense. But this week, it's a good matchup at the Chargers. Fast track indoors. Dallas Goedert, early in the season, was easily the number 1 option in the passing game in terms of consistency, targets, and putting up fantasy points. So this week at the Chargers, I think Goedert, after a couple down games and not getting a lot of looks his way, is a start. And out to the Chargers, Rondé Gatson, he's a fringe option for me. He broke out in the middle weeks of the season as Gatson, but the last 3 weeks he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. And I know he's not 100% with a bruised quadricep injury he's been dealing with on and off his Gatson. But right now, this offense, even if it's Herbert playing in this game or Trey Lance, I don't think Gatson's ceiling is that hard. Ladd McConkey's the guy in the receiving room, obviously, for this Los Angeles Charger team. The backfield, they like running the football a lot. If it's going to be Hampton back this week with Vidal, or Vidal by himself once again. But like I said, in the crucial Week 14, where it's playoffs or bust for fantasy owners, if they're playing this week to get into their playoff spot, I don't know if I could 100% trust Gatson, and he's a fringe option this week. Zach's tight end starts at every matchup for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.